SHALA log 008, March 23rd, 2020. Principles for practice design. This is for those of you who lost your rhythm for a minute or a couple of years and you're making your way back to your practice, or those of you finding your rhythm for the first time. There's an underlying principle in the design of the Ashtanga practice that balances upward energy and downward energy. To give more texture to that, I'll use TKV Desikachar's description of the state of yoga as one in which we balance alertness without tension together with relaxation without dullness. The way I language that when it comes to practice design is every practice needs to have equal parts upregulation and integration. Why? So let's use a scene from a writer many of you, like me, love, and that's William Gibson, in the Pattern Recognition series. One of his protagonists. All of his protagonists are kind of these hard-boiled, hyper-embodied, altruist tech wizards, right? So one of these highly yogic protagonists is about to go out on an op. He's in a factory out in Vancouver, and he's super tense yet focused. And right before he goes out on his op, there's this scene where everything stops and he goes into a state of deep concentration and he practices yoga. The scene looks like a lot like Ashtanga yoga. And what he's doing is preparing to go out into the field of battle, right? So he's cultivating this state, taking the energy in his system and refining that into a state of alertness without tension and relaxation without dullness. Intentionally or not, I take that as a deep reference to the Bhagavad Gita, where yoga is a kind of tool for stabilization of the mind when one is in the field of battle. There are many ways to interpret the field of battle, but a big one is working with one's own mind in states of, apocalypse. If we take the original Greek definition of apocalypse as the great unveiling of what we're really made of and the way that things are. So, how to design your practice for the apocalypse? It should have equal parts upregulation and integration. Those of you who have learned from the beginning with me know that we begin in that way. You start with the bookends, really, of the practice. Then you learn the second and the penultimate piece. And then in the very long run, maybe we fill in the center of the practice with a bunch of asanas, right? So let me say more about that overall practice design for those of you who haven't learned from the beginning with me. The very first piece of the practice, first you say a mantra, the beginning and the end, right? Those are your ultimate bookends. The mantra at the beginning is a request for blessings from your lineage, and the one at the end is a dedication of the merit of the really potentially ego-trippy energy that you build up in your practice. So you dedicate that merit to all beings in all worlds. So those intentions are crucial, and without them, the practice isn't the yoga that we've been taught, right? So then there's the behaviors within those bookends. The first thing is the Surya Namaskar. And the penultimate thing, rest is the very last, right? So the Surya Namaskar and rest, say you had no more than 5 minutes. I would suggest you take kind of the beginning and the end of the practice. You do Surya Namaskar, take rest, you do your mantras in the bookends, and at some level you've stabilized your mind so that you can go into the field of battle. So if you want a little bit more upregulation and a little bit more integration, after the Surya Namaskar here come the fundamental asanas. That is the 11 standing postures that are designed to stabilize the body and the mind before you go into some sort of like yoga program. That they're universal to any Ashtanga practice. So you know the 11 fundamental asanas, most of you. That, if you're doing that, the next thing I would teach you would be closing. So if you double click on closing over here, that has 5 pieces within it. Back bend, forward bend, shoulder stand, headstand, 4 seats. Make it a mantra so that you don't do them out of order. Many of you only have part of closing. Again, back bend, forward bend, shoulder stand, headstand, 4 seats. So in theory, what you do here, if you had a little bit more time than to do one Surya Namaskar and rest and call that like a bead on your thread, would be some Surya Namaskar, fundamental asanas, the portion of closing that really works after that much, that works to integrate the amount of energy you create in your system. So for most of you, maybe that would be shoulder stand in the 4 seats. If you have more of a built-up practice, maybe also back bend, forward bend, and headstand, right? But always getting the 4 seats in there before you take rest, because those are also deeply integrative practices, which we can talk about in another video for those of you who may have forgotten how those work. So that's, again, this is a practice designed to create upregulation and integration in equal parts. You have a finite amount of not physical energy, most of you right now, but a finite amount of concentration. You want to make sure that if you're doing any more than a practice that is these fundamental pieces, if you're actually going into the series, that you have enough concentration to do the integrative piece at the end. If you don't want to experience transformation, if you don't want to experience the integrative effects of stabilization of the mind, forget the integration piece. Forget taking rest at the end of your practice. That is the sure way to make sure that the yoga doesn't actually land in your deep mind and in your nervous system. Just don't do the integration. So take the finite amount of concentration you have. This is like the self-sabotaging practice design. Throw all that energy into doing a run of yoga postures, and then when you start like picking at your toes and checking your phone, like just stop, right? That is not a stability of mind practice design. In fact, it's a practice design that's going to leave you in the long run a lot more disintegrated than when you started. And there's a good question of whether you should do it at all when it comes to the deep effects on your body-mind. So with those pieces in place, you've kind of figured out your own reserves of concentration and what you're capable of doing regularly for a while. Once you're to a place where you can practice consistently and do equal parts upregulation and integration, then I would say start adding back in your primary, whatever, intermediate series, whatever postures that are up here sort of at the top of this plateau. So you've got upregulation. Then, in the universal design of a Ashtanga practice, you have some portion of the primary or intermediate or advanced series or whatever that you're doing consistently, hopefully under conditions like these every day at the same time, right? So you want this piece at the sort of top of your plateau to be consistent so your body-mind knows what to expect day by day. Not only that, but in terms of the actual physical effects on the anatomy of your nervous system and on your physical body, the body needs some level of stability of that program so that if you're asking the body to change, you're making that request in a really consistent, gentle, unsurprising way over time. That said, the postures of the primary, intermediate, advanced series are really like the least important from my perspective when it comes to stabilization of the mind. Getting the overall architecture in place is the stability piece. Adding a portion of this main sort of plateau of the run of postures is where you get into transformation if you practice them in a consistent way. At this point, those of you who are coming back after some absence, just pace yourself. Your body will remember, but a lot of what it's going to need is to learn to trust the practice again. So start to build the routines with the concentration that you have. And then think about if you're adding more of your program in, it's like, okay, I'm going to do these postures today with the knowledge that I'm leaving the reserves of concentration and energy available to do that same program again the next day and the next day and the next day. So you're not just practicing for today, you're practicing with a greater time horizon in view. Big picture, Ashtanga yoga is not about what it looks like. It's not about fancy postures. This is a practice for healing the body mind and stabilizing the body mind so we can go out and be in the world. The grand illusion of postural perfection and the ways that we've objectified the practice, which is fundamentally medicinal and spiritual, is really easy to see at a time like this when we need the practice so much to stabilize our minds, not only for ourselves in the apocalypse, but for everybody around us. So all the more reason to understand this purpose of upregulation and integration so that in the long run of practice, you go about the thing in a stabilizing way. All right, I am looking out at gorgeous snow falling outside my window. I'm going to get out into it when I have a minute this morning. I hope you do the same in the time that we have. Tomorrow is Moon Day, so do the thing and then get a little rest, and I'll see you on the other side. Thank you very much.